So I turned around and I says, "Bring it on, Bubba." And I was in my defensive stance with my hand on my baton.
That's right. Bring it on, Bubba. He said that on behalf of all of us. What you're about to see is not just an altercation between a Vietnam vet and a couple of woke thugs. It's a clash between a dying and decaying liberal order and a rising and ultimately victorious patriot order. You are not going to want to miss this.
But our top story tonight, a Vietnam veteran verbally attacked on a Via bus for wearing his Make America Great Again hat. Tonight, he's sharing his story only on Ken's 5.
So I turned around and I says, "Bring it on, Bubba." And I was in my defensive stance with my hand on my baton.
The intense exchange got so heated, police were called. Eyewitness News reporter Henry Ramos with the outburst and this veteran's message.
I refuse to not wear the hat everywhere.
Kermit Moss is not backing down.
My father died in the Korean War and my mother served in World War II in the Women's Army Corps. So I will not take this hat off for anybody.
Because of his MAGA hat, the Vietnam vet says a Via bus trip to Walmart took an unexpected turn Thursday morning.
He started out right away calling Trump a racist and this and that.
He says two men harassed him because of his pro-Trump hat.
I was still walking to the back, and then the bigger man said something that was intimidating too much. So I turned around and I says, "Bring it on, Bubba." And I was in my defensive stance with my hand on my baton.
Moss says the bus driver then intervened.
The bus driver stuck up with me. I want to thank him. One of them wouldn't shut up, so he got off the bus. He knew that he was calling in a police report.
He says the men were more than just disrespectful, but intimidating.
I think it's going to get worse. I told the policeman that. That's why I went ahead and decided to make the police report, because it's going to get worse. And I'm very sad that the country is divided.
Henry joins us now from Kermit Moss's bus stop in Northwest San Antonio. Henry, what happened to the men?
Deborah, Moss says as soon as the men heard police were involved, one of the men got off the bus, the other just kind of backed off. Moss did talk to police. As you heard there, he says he's afraid that it's going to get worse. In fact, he says this is the third time this has happened to him. Tonight, he just wants to warn other President Trump supporters to be careful. Deborah?
Thank you, Henry.
Now, one of the reasons why I found that news clip so fascinating is that it highlights precisely the two countervailing dynamics that are happening at the same time in our nation, and I would argue indeed in much of the world today. So let's start with the side of the Vietnam vet, that wonderful man. He represents what we might call your traditional conservative. What does that mean? Well, the work of social psychologist Jonathan Haidt has found that conservatives rank relatively evenly in what he calls the 5, sometimes there's 6, moral foundations for society. You may be familiar with this, but social psychologists have developed what's called moral foundations theory to try to understand how different cultures can have different moral systems and codes, and yet they all still have significant moral overlap with each other. And so moral foundations theory helps to explain how innate and universally available psychological systems are the foundations for what they call intuitive ethics, regardless of the weeds, as it were. There are 5 categories of moral foundation in any given society. Everyone has a sense of fairness, where everyone is given their due, as it were. Now, of course, this differs from society to society, but a society simply can't function without at least some kind of fidelity to fairness as the society understands it. So there's fairness. There's what we call harm mitigation, where we put a premium on safety. There's what we call the sacred, all right, which are sanctified rules, understandings, and goals considered absolute and unquestionable. Generally, they're very traditional, very religious. So you got fairness, safety, sanctity. Fourthly, there's a concern for authority and authority structures. And finally, there's loyalty. Placing a premium on the importance of fulfilling one's social obligations to family, to community, to country, and the like. Every society, if it's going to function, has to have these 5 moral categories at its very foundation. What Jonathan Haidt found was that conservatives score relatively evenly across the board in their concern for all 5 moral foundations to society. Liberals don't. Liberals consistently score in only 2 of the categories. They're hyper-focused on fairness and safety. In fact, they're so hyper-focused that, generally speaking, liberals care nothing, literally nothing about sanctity, authority, and loyalty. Think of the way Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have gone out of their way to denounce the royal family, to tarnish them, so brazenly abscond their responsibilities, their loyalties to the monarchy and to their nation, all in the name of this crusade for woke social justice, which is itself rooted in this hyper-extreme concept of equality of outcome and safety for the marginalized. So with these moral foundations in mind, what you had in that altercation with the Vietnam veteran is, in a very real way, a clash between these 2 antithetical social forces. You had a Vietnam veteran who clearly ranks high in all 5 categories. He's risked his life for his nation. His father died in the Korean War. His mother served in World War II. I mean, this is someone who obviously ranks very high in loyalty and patriotism and obligation, authority, sanctity. And here's the key. He's also very concerned about fairness and safety. Indeed, he wouldn't have served, all things being equal, if he didn't care about the safety of his neighbor. These 2 other guys who accosted him were hyper-fixated on Trump as a supposed enemy of equality and safety. And the key here, again, is that hyper-fixatedness prevented them from availing themselves of other moral qualities necessary for honoring their elders and treating others with respect and dignity. You see, being hyper-fixated, they were literally morally blinded to the wider ethical frames of reference necessary for a flourishing and humane society. This is all a fancy schmancy way of saying that liberalism is corrosive and degenerative to society. Liberal attitudes are signs that society is dissipating and unraveling, which is ironic because our supposed educated class thinks liberalism's a sign of intelligence. Morally speaking, it's provably the opposite. It's as morally myopic and idiotic as they come. Again, this is why I have so much hope for the future. Liberalism ultimately is parasitic. It's a dying belief system by its very nature. It lacks the basic moral frames of reference for any long-term sustainability. With traditional conservatives like that Vietnam veteran, not only will we be able to outlast the current left-wing pandemic that's so infested the elites of our society, we will replace them, and we will bid them a fond farewell. As always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. You'll definitely want to check out my latest video on Jordan Peterson leaving Joe Rogan absolutely speechless on the World Economic Forum. You're not going to want to miss it. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.